Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, Lisa Haver will join us to discuss the recent Alliance for Public Schools report regarding charter schools. And Chris Murray will be on in the second half of the program to discuss the proposed 76ers arena. I am here with Denise Clay-Murray. Denise, how are you tonight? And Denise is muted. There we go.
I'm muted. I'm producing tonight. I should know not to do that.
Well, you're pulling double duty, and we appreciate it, Denise. And Lisa, how are you tonight? And you're muted too, Lisa.
And she's muted too. I hadn't unmuted her yet.
Oh, okay. How you guys doing?
Good.
Well,
good.
now that everybody's unmuted, we're fine.
Now that
and this is officially the least glitchy show we've ever done already. So I just want to put that out there because usually something goes wrong at some point. And this is actually not bad.
Well, to err is human. To really mess things up, you need technology.
That's right. Lisa, I want to get right to this because the column we had in the Hall Monitor's newsletter yesterday, there are a couple of things that were astounding to me. So before we get to that, let's start at the top here. Tell us a little bit about the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools.
Thanks, Larry. The Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools is a grassroots organization of retired teachers, librarian, counselors, some rank and file teachers, counselors, librarian in Philadelphia, parents, and I guess we're about 12 years old now, and what we've become to a large extent is a watchdog of the school district and the Board of Education. Up until 2018, we were the watchdog of the School Reform Commission, which the state imposed on the school district. And then in 2018, the Board of Education came back. And so we have seen a lot of things happen in the school district in the past 12 years. And mostly what we've seen and weathered and tried to come out of is the privatization of the public schools in the school district. And, we've talked before about some of the research projects that APS has done. We've looked at charter enrollment because we kept hearing about this waiting list of 10,000 or 40,000, whatever number was out there. And we did a whole report just looking at enrollment figures from the district that showed that about half of the charter schools in the city right now are under enrolled. Mm-hmm. We did a project a few months ago where we compiled all the salary and compensation for charter school administrators. And there's right now, I believe there are 84 charter schools in the city. Now, I want to know how much a school district employee makes. I got one place that I can look that up, and it's massive because everybody is on there from, Superintendent Watlington all the way down to, teachers, classroom aides. When we did our research on the salary and compensation of charter school administrators, we have to go to the individual IRS. It's called a 990 form for nonprofits. You got to go to everyone individually. And we did it, and we looked, and we found that some of the salary and compensation for the, CEOs, which, why do schools need CEOs? I don't know. CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, you name it. But the point is, when you have one central school district, you have one administration. When you divide that one district up into 80 different entities, each with its own administration, it's the most inefficient way you can think of to run a school district. And two, it opens up the door for possible corruption, misuse of taxpayers' funds, and, patronage, nepotism, all the things that, any kind of government agency under the rules of your local regulations, you're not supposed to do that. And there are rules like certain percentage of the money you spend has to go to minority contracting. The whole idea of charter schools, and we're going on about 30 years now since, at least in Philly, the first charter school. The whole idea was privatization of public assets. It came out of, this like post-Reagan deregulation, free market. The free market knows how to do everything. And so the free market can now run schools. And we're seeing that it never was going to work. Now, maybe somebody really believed that was going to work. But if you want to have a school, you need educators to run the school. You don't need, somebody who was a, marketing major. You need educators. You want to run a hospital, you need doctors and nurses and people in medicine. You don't want bean counters. And so it's not been a success. And I think that's pretty clear at this point. Even if you don't sit down and look at all the data, I mean, just look around and say, oh, are schools in the city better? Are the kids in the city having a better educational opportunity? And the answer is no. So
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, what we did here, as we were doing these projects, every time we would look at these IRS forms, it seemed like something else was jumping out at us. And one thing we started to see was, like, as I said, we go to the school board meeting and you sit there and you look at the agenda and you see the list of items, most of them contracts that the school board is going to approve for, windows, doors, books, whatever. And you can sit there and look at that. And you'll know who the district is contracting with. Well, you can't do that with charter schools. First of all, there's 80 of them. You can't go to 80 board meetings. But when we started to look at these forms and we noticed like so much of the business that was being done by charter schools and their management companies was being done with companies that aren't even in Philadelphia. Because one of the ways that charters were sold to people was, this is going to be good for the community and it's going to bring, employment to the community and business to the community. And
where have we heard that before?
I don't know, but okay. We looked at, right now we looked at 1, 2, 3, 4. We looked at 6 of the major contractors, none of which is in Philadelphia. We got, Cherry Hill, Marlton, Cherry Hill, Newtown, PA, Glenside, Mount Laurel. And those are like the major firms like Santilli and Thompson who we talk about. So in what way has the charter privatization movement benefited the city?
Well, it sounds like it's benefited my home state of New Jersey a lot.
Yeah.
Santilli and Thompson, Gerald Santilli, who's one of the co-founders of Santilli and Thompson, he worked for the school district in the 90s as a financial officer. And now he runs this very big consulting firm that does business with a lot of the charters in the city. So at this point, we're almost 30 years in. What do you say? Like, who is this benefiting? And when you look at the salaries and compensation of the administrators and you look at the business that goes to certain companies, you're like, okay, and what order, when are we getting to the kids? When are we getting to the families? We also saw that in some cases, it's a more circular strategy. And then the biggest example of that would be universal schools. So when you have universal schools, you have like universal charter company, universal homes, universal. And so the money takes a more circular route, doesn't go from like, say, a charter to out of the city. It's a different kind of system. And again, when you have that kind of system, it certainly does not lend itself to transparency and can lead to corruption, which in the case of Universal, it did.
Yeah.
Because Universal, I'll just say some elected officials in the city were indicted. And one of the Universal company executives was convicted just in May. And,
actually, weren't two of them convicted?
I thought so, Denise, but when I wanted to verify all my information here, I found one. So I think you're right, but
or because I know it was Raheem Islam and Shahid Dewan, and I think Dewan didn't get convicted of everything he was accused of, but Islam did get convicted of everything. And that kind of leads me to my question.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of the CNBC show American Greed. I could watch American Greed all day. And there are episodes on American Greed where they have addressed some of the stuff that goes on with schools. The one that stands out most to me was a school in Chicago that Ellen DeGeneres gave all of this stuff from Lowe's to rebuild things in the school. And instead of using that money just for that, there was a publisher that was like a textbook publisher or a textbook distributor in the city that was giving kickbacks to teachers and principals in exchange for them using his service. When you look at that here in Philadelphia, I'm surprised that we haven't had an American Greed of our own in this case.
Okay. The first paragraph that in the article that's on the Hall Monitor website right now, I start out by saying, in 2022, Philadelphia Performing Arts Charter, which is is one school but has 3 campuses in 3 different zip codes. Performing Arts Charter paid its former CEO, Angela Carciniti, $2.7 million in management fees. The following year, the school paid her $2.9 million.
Almost $3 million 2 years in a row.
And this is in addition to the salary that she makes.
Correct. And it's also in addition to, so Performing Arts Charter, their oversight company is String Theory. So it's in addition to what Performing Arts Charter paid to String Theory as management. This is all on the IRS 990. And for people who are watching, when you go to my commentary, there's a link to the article that Apps and Philly Power Research did. And you can look. We've got like 18, footnotes, and a lot of those are the IRS forms, and you can see it. I mean, and it just says Angela Corsiniti, $2.7 million. It doesn't say why. So, I mean, we have talked about certain CEOs who are paid by their board $400,000, for 1 year, and we thought that was bad, which it is, since Superintendent Watlington, to oversee about 225 schools, is paid approximately $350,000 annually, and then I'm like, 2.7 million. Why? I don't know. But
well, see, when I brought up the subject of American Greed, it's just when you hear numbers like that, it kind of makes you think: is this the best use of the taxpayers' money? And B, why isn't there someone who's looking at this and saying this isn't the best use of the taxpayers' money? Is it because of the way that the charter school law was written, which it
Yes.
was like written in such a way that there's very little you can do to these schools unless they do something so egregious that you have to do something?
I wouldn't say that, Denise, because you look at this as it's a school district. It has a governing body. It's paid for by the taxpayers. That makes it a political issue right there. And so APS for years has been saying to the Board of Education, you need to have public renewal hearings. You shouldn't be negotiating with them in private meetings. You shouldn't be voting on an item that doesn't say what's in the charter agreement, the renewal agreement. We've been saying that for years. And so the first step that this board could take is having public renewal hearings. And then maybe you could get Angela Carson-Eady to come in and tell us why she's making $2.7 million, or you can get the CEO of Global Leadership to come in and tell us why she makes $425,000, and the CEO of the other GLA makes about $325,000. I mean, who else is going to ask these questions? Denise, I wanted to point out to you that there's always a possibility for corruption when you're dealing with a lot of money. Always. There is a great movie called Bad Education. I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in this subject. And it's a true story. It's based on a true story. And it's great about what happened at a school in Long Island. And one of the best parts of the movie is that this becomes uncovered because of one of the students on the student newspaper. And that happens. I mean, that just happens. But the way that, yes, the charter law in Pennsylvania, because every state has a different type of charter law. It's in some states, including New York, it's not as you're not pushing the rock up the mountain to try to get a bad charter school closed. But, the board just can't go like, oh, well, there's a charter law and it's really bad. They could start talking about some of the stuff, because this board now, as I mentioned, is getting ready to close more neighborhood schools. So, what is up with that? Because there's so much money flowing from the public coffers to the privately managed schools. And I'll give my usual disclaimer. There's a lot of really good people in the charter sector who really believe in what they're doing, who are honest, who are dedicated to the kids. That's great. But the way this system was set up was not in the best interest of the public. In particular, the taxpayers, but really the taxpayer part of it is part of it. What you want to have is really a strong education system. And, diverting money from, public assets to private assets, that is not the way to do it. There's a lot of reasons, like most charter schools are citywide. So it also then diminishes the strength of the community, to unite behind its neighborhood public school, because almost every charter is citywide school. You can live in Manayunk, go to school in West Philly. So there's not that strength of community. Charter schools, the PA charter law specifically said that charter teachers could not join the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. Now, the AFT has actually organized maybe 4 or 5 schools to be in that union, but they can't be, So there's a very deliberate way to diminish the political power of parents and the community and the educators, while they set up a system where, the money is not staying in the community. The money is not benefiting the community. And what are we getting for it? Because on a regular basis, we look at every renewal evaluation that comes up. Public schools are public district schools regularly outperform charter schools in academics, in attendance, and other areas. So, how long do we keep this go on and then say, well, we're going to close some more neighborhood schools? I lived through all this. Most of the people who are working now in apps lived through this. School closing in 2013, and it was devastating. And we saw kids standing up and crying and begging, please don't close my school. I don't want to live through that again. And what is the reason why we have to live through that again? And, to say, oh, we're going to have a robust community engagement, again, we've been through so many of these things where you bring in an outside company and they do that thing where, you have a warm up exercise and then go in your breakout group and then, it's all choreographed and then everybody comes back and reports out. I know you've been to a million meetings like this. And then at the end, it's like, oh, we ran out of time for you to ask all your questions. So this board, we're still operating under the speaker suppression policies that they put into place 3 years ago, where I tried to sign up to speak for the September board meeting. I tried to log in, on the computer. I got there at 4:14. The window opens at 4. I got there at 4:14, closed, but it was already filled up. So, when the board says, oh, we're going to have a dialogue and we're going to make sure the community is engaged, you can not blame people who didn't make it onto the list and who are cut off after 2 minutes, being a little skeptical about how robust this community engagement's going to be. I think maybe the litmus test is, are they going to let me or some of the other apps people on their committee? Maybe. Because as yet, we have not been invited to be on anybody's committee, but it's nobody wants to live through this again. Nobody wants to do it.
Have the meetings for this been set up yet? Because I know that they were mentioned in the last meeting, but have the meetings to, start having these discussions about whether or not, quote, and I hate the word right sizing because that's not a word, not really.
Well, no. But that's one of the principals who came to that September meeting and testified. And thank God there were a lot of principals there. It was really good to see, okay, we're hitting the ground running. And one of those principals said, don't use these corporate terms like right sizing. We're not a corporation. We're schools with children in them. And that's what we have to think about. But if the board wants to shut down a charter school, and again, I've been to so many of these hearings and meetings and legal proceedings, it takes years because the charter school can go through the Charter Appeal Board and then start, I guess, in Common Pleas Court, and could theoretically go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to fight them being closed. You want to close a neighborhood public school, you don't have to do anything. You don't, they're going to have meetings because they'll look bad if they don't. But there is no legal recourse for any public school who says this is not fair and the community needs this school. There's no legal recourse for them. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to take some real, political organizing. And as I said, CASA, the School Administrators Union, they were there. But when you say, Denise, do I trust that it'll be a good process? Well, they kicked off that process by hiring 2 outside consulting firms. One 4.5 million price tag, and the other was 430. So the 4.5 consultant they're going to help to formulate the actual facilities plan. And then the 430 was they're the company that's going to do the public engagement. Do I trust it? No. Okay, short answer. And I say that again as having been through this for over 10 years. No.
Well, how do people get involved to make sure that they stay, that sure, you don't trust them and you probably shouldn't, but if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Correct.
So I guess, how do people, get in touch with you all at APS to make sure that they're not on the menu?
Yes. Thank you, Denise. That is the question. Alliance for Philadelphia Public School. We refer to ourselves as APS. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You want to come to a board meeting, we'll be there too. But you can get us on any kind of social media. And we really do need to say, this is not acceptable. We're not doing this because, in 2013, the superintendent Haidt at the time kept telling us we were going to save $22 million. We have to do is going to save $22 million, and after it all happened, and I went to a meeting and the district's chief financial officer was there. And I said, after all of the closing costs and moving costs and relocation, how much did the district actually save? And he said, about 10 million. So less than half.
After all
that doesn't sound like a lot at all.
Yeah,
that's nothing. I mean, the school district right now, I believe the budget is 4.9
billion.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, billion.
Billion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's 10 million? I don't know.
It's like every time you come on, Lisa, and I hear these numbers that you give us, I think that Larry and I should have tried to stick teaching out for a little while longer so we could become administrators.
Yeah. And then
not district administrators, no. But maybe the charter school.
We could start the hall monitor charter school.
Oh God.
Please.
But these numbers, Lisa, in your article, it's like a baseball contract. Like that's what a utility infielder gets. $3 million.
Yeah. So we mentioned Angela Carciniti. We've focused on the Carcinitis in our last report too, because it's amazing how many people whose last name is Carciniti are making money off of that one school. And so we looked at their 990s and went all the way down and said, oh my goodness, 2.7 million. But we didn't do that for all of the charter schools that, like this could be happening for other charter schools. We don't know. I mean, probably not. Let me say probably not. But
we've never seen anything
possible.
It's possible. But I mean, you're talking about $2.7 million of public money here.
A year.
And let's talk about the schools that might be closing. Could a school that's closing use $2.7 million? It might have been the difference.
Yes. And if the district is saying, if the Board of Ed is saying, well, these schools are under-enrolled, we're wasting space, then I would say APS did a report that showed that half of the charter schools are under-enrolled. So, okay, you want to start in the charter sector.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But no, $2.7 million. Well, Lisa, where can people hear more about APS and read some of your reports and see what you guys are up to?
We're, if you go to us on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you go right to our website and see all the reports. We report on every board meeting. And as I said, we do these research reports too. And I just want to say one last time, Philly Power Research
They're
did
excellent.
a tremendous job on this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Lisa, thank you as always for coming on, and we'll see you real soon, and probably in a few weeks.
Yes.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks,
Yes.
Denise.
All right.
Thank
All right.
you.
Lisa Haver of Apps, thank you so much. Denise,
Yes.
let me see if I can bring my slideshow up. Do you know how to do that? Oh, you got it. All right.
Got it.
So now we're going to move from one. I'll just say we're going to move to the arena. So, we've been following this story for a while, since its inception, really.
Mm-hmm.
We have discussed with activists and advocates about the effect this will have in the community where it's being built. I don't think that's disputable at this point. Next week on the program, Denise, you and I did an interview earlier this week with Dr. Jeffrey Profiter, who is from the University of Colorado, and he studies this specific issue.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things he told us, I think, are things that I didn't know about that make this even more of a challenge. I think there are things that he said that I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. So we're going to have that interview next week on the show.
Okay.
All right. So what I want to do now is we're going to talk a little bit of the nuts and bolts here. And this is, I'm not going to lie, this is dense material. And there are hundreds of pages of this stuff. There's 11 pieces of legislation that have been drafted, not in the final shape, but drafted, that show what's, you can take a look at it and see it. We've read all this. It's dense, it's confusing. So what I tried to do here is break it down a little bit and just sort of show kind of what it does and what it's going to do. And I hope I do this justice because it's a lot of stuff and I just didn't think we're going to do all of it, but I wanted to give people a little bit of it. And then there's something we found that we're concerned about in here. Okay. And in a minute, Lance is going to come on to discuss that with us. But before we do that, I just want to walk through this a little bit. And even my notes on this are dense. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. I'm just going to kind of walk.
It's probably a good idea.
I know. I really tried to figure out a way to.
Wow.
I know. So in the primary document, the really long document that discusses the terms and how all this works out, the city lays out the why. Why are we doing this? Well, we think, and when I say we, I'm speaking as the city. This will generate tourism. It'll help retail and commercial businesses, those kinds of things. The arena will be a brand new modern facility. It'll be owned by the Philadelphia, we'll explain the ownership structure in a minute. We'll get to that. Mm-hmm. But it'll be a venue that the city can also use for different things, not just basketball, but other events. The Sixers will use it. Some of the college teams and even high school teams will be able to use this. So that's one of the selling points for the city. They believe, we'll go back one there. Something's going on here. Then we go there. They believe that the arena will revitalize that part of the city and construction will create thousands of jobs. Okay. That's the why. That's why the city wants to do this, according to legislation that they have written that's drafted that will pave the way for this. So how do they do this? If you ever go to a city council meeting, one of the phrases you will hear over and over and over again when we're talking about bills that deal with land disposition: acquire fee simple title to all portions of such and such. Okay, because that means the city is buying something or taking something, how that works. So the city will have these properties where the arena will be built. Okay, so they're going to collect all these properties. And this is all legalese. I won't go through the rest of it, but it just basically says that this is how they do it. And these are the areas where they're going to do it, right? Acquire all the titles to the parcels around it. and then enter the lease agreement. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is skip through that and get to the timeline. So in 2026, that's when demolition of the buildings that need to be removed will happen. Construction will begin in 2028, and the arena is slated to open in the fall of 2031 in time for that year's basketball season, right around this time of year.
And they need 3 years to build this?
Well, that's a good question. We've been told no, but they say yes. So this card is blank, the lease agreement. And the reason it's blank is because I want to bring on Lance Haver, our consumer reporter.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you so much, Lance, for being here. Now, when we started looking at this, I wanted to make sure you looked at it too. So I had somebody else who knew what was going on here, because I don't know what the hell's going on.
So let me call to your attention 2 facts that aren't in the lease agreement that end up explaining why there's a lease agreement. The first is the city home rule charter doesn't allow the city to enter into a lease for longer than 4 years. And that's to stop one administration from having a sweetheart deal with their friends or their political supporters or their people who they think are great. So any lease the city enters into for anything can only be for 4 years. And of course, a stadium that wants to be in existence for 30 years can't live with that. They need to have a longer lease. So the city can't enter into a direct lease. The second fact is the city, when it borrows money, pledges taxpayers' dollars. So the city borrows money for infrastructure repair, it borrows money to pave the streets. When they borrow the money, and they call it a bond, so again, very confusing. But what they're doing is they're borrowing money from rich people or rich institutions, and they're saying, don't worry, we'll pay you back, and if we don't, you can collect our taxes directly from us. But a private institution, a stadium, the Sixers, a private business cannot by law have direct access to taxpayer dollars. So there's a prohibition against that. Historically, the way that's been gotten around is cities set up what are called authorities. And an authority is really a separate thing from government. The stadium authorities, the convention center authority, the Pennsylvania Industrial Development Authority. These are all places where elected officials appoint people. Those people get established by the state legislature. They can then borrow money, but they can't use taxpayers' dollars to pay off those loans, to pay off those bonds. That's not legal. So they enter into these incredibly complex formulas called leaseback agreements. And here's what it looks like. The stadium wants hundreds of millions of dollars borrowed from the city. The city says, well, we're going to be the backstop for that, and we'll lease you the land, and you'll lease it back from us, and we'll pay the bonds with whatever you get the ticket sales from. And if there's a shortfall, then the city will take money out of the current revenues, not out of the revenues for the next year, but just out of this revenues to pay off the shortfall. An example of that is, I know we're all Phillies fans, and it's great for the city budget when the Phillies do well. But during the COVID years, when no one was in the stands, the bondholders didn't agree to skip payments. So the city just took money out of the operating budget and gave it to the rich people because no tickets were sold. Now, that is an incredibly unusual situation. The normal situation is they can't sell enough tickets, so there's a shortfall, and that shortfall is made up of city taxpayers. So those are the reasons why the Sixers deal that's being proposed is so convoluted. And here's what it is. The city wants to use its ability to buy land or take over streets and condemn those streets and take ownership of it. We don't know what the value of any of those things are yet. We don't know how much land the city is going to have to buy. We don't know who they're going to have to buy it from. There's some difficulties in terms of figuring out what we now call the fashion district, the old gallery, whether those buildings have any value, because real estate, I think most people know, commercial real estate in the city of Philadelphia has been going down in value, while residential properties have been going up in value. So we don't really know what the land is going to cost for the city to buy it. But the city has the ability to take over the land, to take over the streets, and put together all this land. Now, it can't directly lease it to the Sixers, because the Sixers would not be happy with a 4-year lease. So they have to find somebody else to do it. And that's another authority, the paid authority. So the city takes all this land and leases it to paid for $10. That's what's in the proposed lease. Paid then takes that land and leases it to the Sixers for at least 30 years for $1. Now, here's the weird part. We're told that there's no public dollars involved in this. But what we don't know is who's going to end up paying for that land, how much we're going to end up paying for that land, and what the present value of that land purchase would be going forward. The second thing we don't know is how much that land would be taxed for, because we don't know its value. We don't know what it's going to sell for, so we don't know what it would be valued for. So the way it's now working is the city will collect all the property. We don't know how much it will cost. We don't know whether it will be expensive or not expensive. It is hard to consider Center City acreage not expensive, but we don't know yet. It takes that land, it leases it for $10 to paid. Paid then takes that package of land and leases to the Sixers for 30 years. And the Sixers then go ahead and agree to pay what they call a pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes. Now, why they don't pay any taxes is very simple. They don't own the land. They have a right to buy the land at the end of the lease, but during the lease process, when they haven't had to take any money out of pocket to buy the land, and they don't have to take any money out of pocket to finance the purchase of the land, and they don't have to take any money out of pocket to pay the taxes, they're paying something in lieu of those taxes. But pilots are not enforceable. So if the Sixers, for whatever reason, and there's no reason to believe they're not honest, decent, wonderful business people. There's absolutely no reason to think that they're anything other than great. But if economic pressures are such on them and their other holdings that they can't make a pilot payment, there's no recourse. In this lease agreement, there's the term is a clawback, and that is, well, what happens if you don't make those payments? What happens if you fall short? What happens if you don't hire the minority businesses you say you're going to hire? What happens if you don't have all these things that you say you're going to do? What happens next? And many agreements have a clawback. So in other words, you agreed to hire 20% minority businesses. You didn't. We're going to claw back $50 million now and take that money and put it into a venture capital fund for economically distressed businesses. That's not in here. The other thing that's not in here, again, we don't know what the total purchase price is. We don't know how much the taxes would have been. We don't know if the land were used for some other reason, how much wage tax and other taxes would have been collected. And the other thing that's not in here is any type of leverage for local business purchases. So the city of Philadelphia could put into the lease agreement, the Sixers have to buy locally. They have to buy from local businesses. They can't agree to buy anything from prison labor. They can't agree to buy anything from slave labor. There's nothing in there. There is a provision that they can't buy from Northern Ireland, and there's some provisions about other countries they can't buy from. But nothing about slave labor, nothing about prison labor, and nothing about any business that they do business with has to have profit sharing. Now, I know we've got Chris Murray, who's much more knowledgeable about sports than I am, and I don't claim to be a Sixers fan. So for me, as a person looking at this, I will probably never go to a Sixers game. So I don't have, as they say, a dog in the fight, whether it's a good location or a bad location. But as a lease agreement, here's what's missing. We don't know the purchase price. We don't know what they would have been paying in taxes and compare that to the pilot. We know there's no clawback provisions, And we know there are no provisions that say if they don't reach their minority goals in hiring, that anything happens to them. In fact, the language is very clear. All they have to do is make a best effort, and that's sufficient. The language is even clear about whether they're going to have games there for 30 years or not. On page 10 of 130, and Larry, you're right, it's incredibly dense. And part of that is because lawyers are involved. Part of that is it makes it very difficult for lay people to understand what's being discussed. But page 10 of 130 in the ground lease agreement, section L, it is the intention that upon substantial completion of arena facility and the arena therein by tenant, the Philadelphia 76ers, the holder of the NBA franchise, known as the Sixers, will play their home team's games as defined. They're not even compelled to do it. It's just their intention to do it. So mentioning all those loopholes, let me turn it over to you. Let me see if you have any questions, and then we should turn it over to the three of you to discuss the merits or lack thereof of putting a stadium in Center City and what the organic growth of the city might be if there wasn't a stadium.
What I really want to do, Lance, is take what you just said and we'll write that up and we'll make sure that's in our newsletter this week. So I think people need to see that.
Okay.
So Lance, thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you.
Good night. I wish we're a lot simpler, that I could say they're going to spend $1 billion and this is how much property taxes they're losing, and the pilot does, covers it or doesn't. But I don't know anybody who can say that with any sense of certainty without prevaricating.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Which is lying for those of us who don't know what prevaricating is.
Right. All right, Lance. Thank you
And
so
thanks,
much.
Chris. I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Lance.
And we'd like to bring on Chris Murray here, our sports correspondent. Chris, how are you tonight? I think
he's
Chris is muted.
Let me unmute him.
Oh, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, I'm about to jump on the train, and I heard an interesting conversation about all the money and logistics, part of it. And I'm still against having that stadium downtown because it's just a logistical nightmare. I mean, I'm sure they're going to make the best of it and everything in terms of, you have to excuse me because, I'm about to go.
Yes, we hear the dinging of the train. Yes.
Yeah. And so, on one hand, I can understand, people are promising jobs to minority contractors. I get it and everything. I understand it. But at the end of the day, how are they going to make it easier for people to get to the game? See, that's the thing that I'm worried about, is that, it kind of reminds me of how in Baltimore, the old Memorial Stadium was like in a neighborhood, and you had to go through, if you're coming in from downtown or from off the expressway, it was almost a logistical nightmare when it was like a World Series or NFL playoff game. So from that perspective, it's going to be. I'm going to be interested. Will they let the trains run? I hear SEPTA is cutting back service. So I wonder how this is going to be for the fans. And this is why I'm kind of like, there's nothing wrong with Wells Fargo or the Philly Stadium complex. It's accessible. And that's the thing that I worry about in terms that people say it's only 41 dates out of a year. They're going to be making money with concerts. NCAA tournament, both men's and women will be down there at some point. They're going to get a bid for the All-Star game, the NBA All-Star game, and they're talking about bringing a WNBA franchise to Philly. So, but I just wonder if it's going to be advantageous to the consumer who wants to see a game. Nobody wants to pay, but they're going to charge an arm and a leg for parking. They do that out of Citizens Bank Park and the Lincoln Financial Field. And then what if you have concerts? What if you have concerts down there? So it's a lot to unpack. And in this situation, Because one of the reasons why I respect Lance is that I'm concerned about the fan and the consumer. That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, let me ask you something, honey, because I was listening to your show on Saturday, and someone was on your show and they were talking about how they didn't understand why so much was being made of where this stadium was located, particularly its proximity to Chinatown. One thing that I'm starting to notice as we talk about this stadium is that it has created yet another rift between two groups of marginalized people. Now, as somebody who is not only a sports person, but also is a political science person, when you hear stuff like that, what does that make you think about?
Well, I gotta say this. The 1%, the genius of the 1% in this country is its ability to keep people divided. You know, its ability to keep people. I'm about to get on the train, but its ability to have groups fighting each other for little crumbs, as you always like to put it. So, and that's always the bad part about this situation. And in a real sense, does anybody? I mean, nobody really wins because they always promise these jobs to they always promise this. They always promise these jobs, for minority contractors and things of that nature. And from what I understand, people always get the short end of the stick at the end anyway. You're going to interrupt the community, and then people who need jobs and all this other stuff oftentimes get the short end of the stick. So it's once again they do it every time. Almost since Bacon's Rebellion. It's the same old thing, dividing those who are working class or poor against each other, and it's a shame. And it's a shame because, like I said, nobody wins in that situation. Chinatown's not going to win. The black community's not going to win. So, it's the same old, same old.
So part of the reason that the Sixers are giving for wanting their own stadium is the fact that they want to go from renters to owners. Now, you've probably heard that the Eagles, the Flyers, and the Phillies are trying to create, with the help of Comcast, their own version of Wrigleyville with hotels and apartments and things like that. And they've also said to the Sixers that they are invited to be a part of this project. They would have their own space that they would own. But the only reason why I can think of that the Sixers are pushing so hard to get out of Wells Fargo and to go downtown is because of the relationship between the team and Comcast. Is it really that bad?
That's something that's on the business end that I don't know about, but if it is that bad, the Sixers have their own reasons why for wanting to build that stadium downtown, and I guess they want to have their own place, their own space, and you know, I mean, if they want to build their own stadium, that's fine, or be a part of Wrigleyville. They don't have to, if it depends. If Comcast offers them, as you got to follow the money, and if they offer them a sweeter deal, will they take it? But I guess they want to own their own space. I think that's that's capitalism. They just want to own their own space.
Did you have a question, Larry?
No, I think you covered everything I was going to ask about, Denise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for. But I have one quick Phillies question before you go. Which Ranger Suarez do you think we're going to get?
Well, if he's well rested, then you'll get the Ranger Suarez who started off the season with 8 or 9 straight wins in a row. That's what I'm thinking. But it's late in the year. This is probably his first year going, this amount of innings, this year. So, we'll see, and we'll see how this thing turns out. I mean, there's one thing I like. I mean, the teams who are the number one seeds rarely win, or top seeds rarely win. So we're in the World Series eventually. So I think that I think the Phillies have a chance they on paper they can go to the World Series. And I think they'll get to the NLCS at the race, but I think they can go to the World Series. I think they can win it.
I don't like that bye week.
Yeah, that was the problem with it when I think we won it last year. I think when the Braves, you know, won it, had the best record in baseball, and it just takes some time off. It throws teams off. So I'm about to go into a tunnel. So
Okay.
I,
Well, thank you for joining us, Chris.
So I don't like the bye week, Denise, because it throws everything off. Baseball's about timing.
Well, I think that they kind of agree with you on that because they're having an interleague game to kind of keep, everybody fresh and moving. But it's weird that a lot of this show has focused on sports and the business of sports. And I think that the reason for that is the reason why stadiums are so popular, like new stadiums are so popular, the reason why we pay so much attention to sports, especially here in Philadelphia, is that we've given it an outsized importance.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. As soon as we're done with the show and we wrap up, I am probably going to go on to I'm probably going to go and sit down in front of my television to see if the Mets eliminate the Brewers and the Braves get eliminated by the Padres. I've already watched the Detroit-Houston game, and as somebody who's always got a soft spot for places like Detroit, I'm glad that they beat the Houston Astros and are now on their way to the NLDS.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the reason why folks are able to come into places like Philadelphia, the poorest city of its size in America, and say, we want to put a $1.3 billion stadium in your downtown. The reason why they're able to say that and why the Sixers were able to say, if you don't give it to us, we're going to leave, is that sports in Philadelphia is so much of our identity.
Yeah.
It's so much. I mean, they're talking about having a doggone Rocky Fest.
Yeah. And that's a fictional character.
Right. And Rocky is a fictional character.
Yeah.
So, we place so much of our identity as Philadelphians, and even as like residents of the Delaware Valley, on sports. And maybe if we did less of that, a lot of the really unhealthy stuff that, goes on, it wouldn't go on so much anymore.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, Denise, and we're going to be talking more about this next week with Dr. Jeffrey Profiter, who is going to tell us why a team owner putting up the money for the arena does not necessarily mean the city will not be paying for this arena.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have more with that next week. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.